Hello and welcome back to Parley, my on-the-spot responses to the prompts you folks submit. This one is from vampbug, hope you'll enjoy listening. It's about a bunch of Simic decks. Well, I had in a previous Parley suggested that we try to make that most uninteresting color combination in Magic the Gathering's trading card game, blue and green, a very good stuffy color combination, into a bunch of interesting strategies that didn't do the normal thing that is just sort of a slurry of generic value that wins in the least interesting way possible. And you said, I'll take you up on your offer from last parlay to make a bunch of different Simic decks, but I'll also limit the scope severely and showcase a deck of my own. What you'll be doing is making a removal suite for one of my decks. Linked below, and here it is, we'll get back to it later, is one of my recent mono green decks, but with most of the removal cut. I'll have you select 12 removal spells, good number, by the way, that fit the deck, and then I'll show you what I run in those slots. Cool, seems straightforward enough. So as you can see, if we look back here, we have a deck that has 88 cards. It's got the land, it's got basically everything else, it's done, but it doesn't have much removal. We'll talk about these as well, by the way. And I'm going to add 12. Obviously, the things we would do next would be sort of bushwhack and try to figure out what the deck is doing, what the deck is about, and therefore what kind of removal would fit it in various ways. However, here's an elevator pitch for the deck. Okay, fantastic. You've done that as well. This is a really a cozy parlay for me. You really set it up so I can just do the thing you asked, and that's great, by the way. So here's your commander. Let's take a look for a minute. Ovia Pishiria is my commander because I want to make increasingly large XX tokens every turn with her second ability. This means every game I play her on turn 1, hope she doesn't get shot, and try to activate her 5-mana ability as soon as possible, and every turn rotation if possible. This means on turn 2, you're probably playing a utility creature or a mana dork, and on turn 3, you're playing another one, a 4-mana token generator, or activating Ovia for a 1/1 if you're desperate. After that, it's pretty straightforward. Either play a high-impact spell and or just play your land and pass, waiting to sink 5 mana into Ovia to make a sizable creature. And here's some hints, even further, wow, that might help you with picking out removal for this parlay. The removal spells could stand to be higher impact. Yeah, I was initially thinking that too. I have lots of mana generation in the deck, and the commander and token generators could win a game by themselves, but it'll take a very long time because I don't run big Craterhoof style buffs to kill someone with 1/1s. That's important. So yes, in this deck you've avoided like an overrun effect. Buff everything up, +3/+3 or whatever, and then give them trample so they can overrun blockers and do piercing damage. You've chosen to not run those effects, so I'm going to honor that and I won't add them. I'll avoid things like that. But that obviously does significantly reduce the power level of the deck. We'll get back to that in a minute. My draw suite isn't robust. No, it's not. I noticed that as well. I aim to use removal at the last viable moment, and my hand naturally refills itself with expensive spells I can't cast because I'm spending 5 mana every turn on Ovia. Yes, your commander is a mana sink, so you will tend to need a little less draw as long as the mana sink is part of the game plan, which it is. Yep. So you arguably don't need as good draw spells. You're not asking me to find those. I would probably still increase the quality of the draw in this deck a little bit, but I don't think it's illogical not to. I do care to draw lands at every point in the game, though, which is why lots of the draw is geared toward that, and why I run 46, put a pin in it, we'll get back to that too, lands. Most people run way too few lands. This is the first time in my entire life that I've thought maybe somebody was running too many lands, but not by very much, and well, anyway, we'll get into it. Finally, here's the link to the deck, the spoilered 12 cards I actually run, and some Scryfall links to kickstart your search for removal spells. Hey, we'll talk about this a little bit more later. What a kind parlay. You really thought about what would make it, you have these things. You were doing this. So if you're asking me, why not just give me those materials? And you made it very straightforward. You've done Magic the Gathering stuff on Parlay with me before. So you had my Architect account link and just added me as an editor and did all of this too. As I've always said, you're welcome to do whatever the heck you want with Parlay. You just have to make it so I could do it within 45 minutes or so. And you just really did a good job with that. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And what a fun idea as well. So I think it's worth briefly browsing the deck just a little bit more to get to know what we're into. A lot of what the beginning of this parlay would have been you just did in that little preparation set of paragraphs. That was really good, by the way. It's interesting. This deck is aiming for a lower power level. It seems like we are going to talk about power level a little bit, not the like commander bracket thing. If you use that, that's fine, but I don't think that's good or useful. And I don't know if you're using it this way. So I'm just going to look at the deck and think logically about what I think its power level would be. And I will try to respect that when I add cards to the deck. We're not going to add the sweatiest removal of all time. Well, not necessarily anyway. We'll get into that. Just because it would be good in the deck if the deck is aiming to win by going wide, basically playing like White Weenie or like a bunch of little creatures, an overrun strategy without an overrun effect. I hope it doesn't at all insult you. I think this is cool to say that this is a very low power strategy, very low power. It's extremely vulnerable to removal. There's practically nothing to keep the deck protected except for the protection category, but doing it that way is a little bit harder. You're basically treating the symptom rather than doing something preventative, if you want to think of it that way. This is not the lowest power it could be, but this is probably the second lowest power that this type of strategy could be. We're not playing a high-powered deck here. If we try to add cards like that, well, we need to know what we're doing. We'll get into it. But the first thing to notice is that trying to win with Ovia Pashiri and you will not use overrun effects is definitely like we're doing a weaker power thing. This is great, by the way. I feel like you know that in the description of the deck, and you still did the good deck building stuff, and you have a plan for how the deck will roll itself out. So actually, let's look at that briefly. So as you said, usually it's going to be turn 1 Ovia. You hope she doesn't get killed. Again, that already much lower power strategy, but there's nothing wrong with that. And then you can see that a lot of the draw and a lot of the ramp is indeed between like 2 and 3 mana. And so you're expecting to spend the middle turns casting that. Then around the time you'd be able to use Ovia's second ability, you're planning to use it. And a lot of the draw is on a body. So you have something like Tender Wild Guide or Elvish Visionary is, I think, on the weak side of a card in this deck, but I understand why it's in here. You have other stuff like Sharp-Eyed Rookie, which is pretty much the same 2 mana draw body, but the draw is more sustained. She makes clue tokens, basically, but then it's slower. You know, you have to crack them. But this deck likely has the mana. I think this is a good choice for this deck. I think this is the type of card I would want to see in this deck more, rather than Elvish Visionary, because it's like you need the draw if you need it, but you might really need it. You might get board wiped and then the deck needs to really recoup. I would be more into clues. They're actually kind of like the perfect draw source here, because if you need them, you can crack them. If you don't have to. But then if you really need them badly, you've got a whole bunch. You can draw the amount that you need. I feel like this deck is going to have variable draw needs. So this type of thing, it's kind of like treasure tokens. You have the flexibility to draw more if you need to, or maybe Ovia gets killed one turn, and so you don't use that activation. You spend your 4 to 6 mana on clue token popping instead. So anyway, I just think that's a good choice. Let's tackle the land thing briefly. So I said, actually delightedly, that I very rarely felt like I found a deck that maybe had too many lands. Now, we're not going to go into this too much because most of the audience that thinks it's okay to run 30 lands in a commander deck hopefully just doesn't enjoy these videos or thinks they do. If you like thinking about making builds, I think you've concluded by now that that's not enough. If you made a Magic the Gathering deck that was 60 cards, you'd frequently run about 24 land, 40%. And so in Commander, 100 cards, you would run 40 land. And that would be like the basic amount. That's not a lot. That's like a neutral amount. If you look at people who play Commander, you will find that very few commonly shared Commander decks run 40 land. And they are all wrong. That's not enough. That doesn't mean that they don't work. I don't not believe the people who play them that they work well sometimes, just to say that it would almost certainly improve most of those decks a lot if they ran more land. How much more? Well, it's a little bit tricky because Commander often has a lot of mana generators and also a lot of card draw. But yeah, definitely more than 40. And indeed here, 46. Now it's 46 with modal double-face cards. You've got Colony Ambush and Bridgeworks Battle for removal, and then Tangled Florahedron as a ramp creature. Pretty good modal double-face cards for this deck. exist. And you're also counting a couple of things as lands that are basically modal spells that cost 1 mana and can get you a land in your hand. In other words, the cost of converting these cards from a spell into a land is you consider negligible. Definitely for this power level, I would say I think I agree that is negligible. And then they have like some very small side benefits. So for example, this can get you a non-land if you want it to. This, if you can collect evidence 8, is also a creature tutor or a land tutor, I think. This can be a fight spell. And so there's not too many of these. Like if you went crazy with this mindset and put like 10 of these in here, I think that would not work. But because you only have 2 or 3 and they do like good enough things besides just getting you a land, I think it's fine. Like I'm picking up what you're putting down. And if you look at it that way, minus the modal double face cards and minus the cards that are technically not a land, although I don't think it's problematic to consider them a land, you have about 40 lands. Okay, and this deck has a high, but not ridiculously high curve on top of a significant amount of draw and ramp. That's likely fine. I feel like that's probably the right amount. So anyway, I just thought that was cool. People do lands so badly, I just can't resist saying I feel like you thought this through in a reasonable way. I think that's awesome. And just an aside, we'll come back to this, but the protection suite. So you don't have the overrun stuff and you don't have that many resilient creatures. You do have a lot of token generators, but creatures that, like, when they're killed, they come back or leave behind value or something. The deck doesn't have a lot of those, but you do have 10 cards that offer some form of protection. Not very many of them protect your other creatures, but a good number of them do. For example, Stonehoof Chieftain is kind of like Overrun, but for indestructible instead of trample. Interesting choice. And indeed, this does have trample. It's not like you don't have anything with trample. You just didn't focus on that. Spearbreaker Behemoth can often make those construct tokens from Ovia have indestructible. Rapid Vigor gives everything a regenerate, etc. Just quickly while we're here, because we're not really going to talk about this that much in this parlay, I wanted to recommend Soul of New Phyrexia as a potentially good, like, colorless but mono green solution to this kind of thing. It does just have the ability to give everything indestructible, and then if it dies, you get one more go of the indestructible ability from the graveyard. You can exile it from your graveyard to do it one more time. So this might be a nice card for this type of strategy. You want to make sure that it doesn't, your deck doesn't just get wiped, but you wanted to play it at a relatively lower level. Maybe this is a card that works here, and you have the mana for that type of spell. So removal, you already have a bit of removal in here, and we're going to briefly talk removal philosophy, at least as I'm going to see it, and then we'll just look at a bunch of spells and pick some stuff. Look at what you picked, and then that's the parlay. So Colony, Ambush, and Birdworks Battle, yep, they're fight type spells. Very good fit for this deck. You have a dispenser that creates medium to large size creatures, so these will usually be very easy to get value out of. Scrap Gorger, obviously Green's specialty is artifact and enchantment destruction, but also not bad at, I often think of it as mulching or composting, destroying a card in the graveyard or exiling a card in the graveyard. Armored Scrap Gorger does that over and over again and is also a mana dork. A very good fit for this deck. This card is a slam dunk for this strategy. Master of the Wild Hunt, you get a lot of tokens, and then this can be tapped to make the tokens like sick on an enemy and attack them and fight them. A very good fit. You can have lots of bodies, which makes Ovia's tokens bigger, but it's also basically removal. Token engine plus removal, very good. I don't like Cheeseaker Chimera in here. I feel like if removal gives your opponent this much control, like you just attack and it will destroy some things, I would categorize this more as a draw spell. You draw 3 cards and you get value, like it will kill some stuff as it crashes in. But I don't really consider this to be removal in the sense that if you want something gone, it's very unlikely this will kill this specific thing you want gone. It's pretty easy for your opponent to not have their thing die to this if they want to avoid that. But it's fine. I'll just leave it alone just to say I would categorize this as draw. So philosophy for removal for this deck. We're playing at a lower power level, so I think it's logical to think that the removal ought to be lower powered. I'm not entirely sure this is the case. There's kind of a couple of different things. The first one is specific to vampbug. You've done other Parley that were about Magic the Gathering decks, and you pay for Parley frequently, so I think that you are interested in hearing my full take on the subject, which you probably know is going to include doing some detective work about what kind of playgroup you play in. And I think you play in a playgroup where people use powerful removal, but not like mean removal, I guess, so to say. So for example, we had a previous conversation about cards that exile the entire graveyard. Magic the Gathering has a bit of a problem, I think, among its many problems in Commander, with graveyard hate. Most graveyard hate is your entire graveyard is gone, or the people don't run graveyard hate, basically. There are lots of cards in the game that destroy select cards in a graveyard, or turn off the graveyard until they are destroyed, and those are much healthier for the game, in vampbug and my opinion, but people don't run them as much because they're less powerful. But those other graveyard hosers are just really overpowered, way too strong, and I would argue are just kind of a design mistake, except in extremely competitive formats. And people play them in Commander, I think, partly because they just don't play enough interaction. The average Commander player doesn't play enough land, also doesn't play enough anything that interacts with their opponent. Their deck is quite solitary. And so if you're going to have a random pod of Commander decks and players won't accept playing much interaction, the result is, you can see where this is going, it tends to be that the nuclear escalation is to blow up the whole graveyard. When you do interact, hose the living hell out of anything you interact with, which is not healthy. I think there's a big difference between weak removal, strong removal, and game mechanic deleting removal. And I personally think that I know you don't want to be there, but just because the deck is here doesn't mean I don't think we might want to be here with the removal. Besides avoiding this stuff that just deletes a whole part of the game, you exile someone's whole graveyard, it kind of seems to me like your deck here is built with it in mind that you will have heavy resistance. It sounds to me like your playgroup is playing relatively stronger removal than the strategies that are being piloted to win, and I think that that makes some sense. If you don't play board wipes, or just exclude board wipes from your mind for a second, you could argue that spot removal is quite bad in Commander. You have 3 other opponents, and you play 1 card, 4 mana, that destroys one of one other player's, things. On average, this helps your opponents more than it helps you, and you lose card value compared to your opponents. You spend 1 card to remove, on average, 1/3 of a card from your opponents, and you have 1 less threat to deal with, while your opponents each also have 1 less threat to deal with. So you sort of gave them twice the benefit, or twice the relief from pressure. Spot removal can be seen as being very bad in Commander. Now, obviously, the flip side of that is that you have a very target-rich environment when you have a card that destroys like an artifact or enchantment in Commander. Unlike in one-on-one Magic, you can be virtually guaranteed to have a very good target as long as you don't play a huge amount of it. There will be an excellent artifact or enchantment to remove that you really want gone. And so in that way, it's sort of more reliable. Removal is kind of better in a way in Commander, but also a little bit more costly. And so high impact removal is sort of good anyway, if your format can accommodate it. If you're playing at a power level, it can. And this definitely can. So personally, I feel like a strategy being on the weaker side doesn't mean it's good to play less removal. It's just good to avoid the super hardcore removal, but still play strong interaction. One other thing is that relatively lower power games tend to be relatively more won on the board. Put some damage on the stack, you nerd, that kind of thing. And so if there's more creatures, it's reasonable to have slightly more removal. You're not going to machine gun down everything. The deck doesn't have a powerful enough engine to do that. But we might as well get things that are reasonably strong. And that being said, like a 2-for-1 is probably fine here. And there are some of those I can think of in mono green. Now let's just look through a bunch of cards and pick some stuff. I'm just going to add everything I like to the deck, sort them out a little bit, and then cut it down to 12. And I'm mostly going to keep to your lists. I have a few other quick experiments I want to do. I feel like you gave me enough to work with that we will more than fill the time in Parlay just looking at the cards you suggested. So you gave me a couple of searches. That was really helpful. That was considerate of you. Let me make myself a little smaller. Not that most people can probably read the cards, but if you're on like a TV or something, then maybe you, I don't know how people watch these. Most people don't, right? You're listening to it as a podcast. So the first search you gave me is multi-target removal that or is a one-sided sweeper in mono green, basically. So colorless or mono green. And here's a bunch of stuff. So already things that stick out to me: Steel Hellkite, Terastodon. I want to talk about Azuri's Predation, but I don't think it should be in there. Pest Infestation. Collective Resistance is just a really good card, but we'll talk about that. Wear Down is a 2-for-1. I'll talk about Rootcast Apprenticeship. Okay, it opened in a separate window. Classic. There we are. Smokestack. Barrier Breach. Probably no, but we'll talk about it. Spinning Wheel Kick. Palu Palu. You love to see Polychronos. Kusari Gamma. Yeah, maybe. Okay. I don't. What is this? Hold on. I'm stopping to read this one. It's lagging. Okay, I guess I'm not stopping to read that one. We'll open it and look at it later. Betrayal at the Vault, target creature, each of 2. It's a 6-mana 2-for-1. Gleeful Sabotage, a 2-mana 2-for-1. Primeval Light. So we're not going to get into all of these, but this is the kind of card I'm mostly avoiding. It just destroys all enchantments target player controls. This is actually even worse than most cards of its type, like destroy all enchantments, because a lot of the time, of the 4 players at the table, a few of them will have like 1 or 2 enchantments, but maybe 1 out of 4 on average will be like an enchantment heavier strategy. They enchant lands for ramp, or they're an enchantress deck, or both, or whatever it is, right? They use a lot of enchantment based removal, something like that. And this hoses the hell. That one player is just deleted, basically. You get a single out board wipe for 4 mana, and the other players aren't affected at all. I don't think this is a bad card. At higher levels where people can rebuild from that, their deck is designed to recoup from having their entire board wiped, this can be fine. You're not like a bad person if you play this card, but this is an example of the type of removal I suspect isn't a good fit for this deck's power level. So that's just a guess, but I'm going to avoid those, and that's why. There's a couple other things like this. 1 damage to each attacking creature. I wanted to look at that. Stomp and Howl is destroy an artifact and an enchantment for 3 mana. I feel like we can do better than this. Aerial Volley is 3 damage divided among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures with flying for 1 mana. That's probably not worth it. I would just take Sandstorm. And that's good enough for now. Okay, let's start. So something like Sandstorm. This is a defensive removal card. The reason I want this in here is it deals 1 damage to each attacking creature. I want this for flyers, like bird tokens or something, basically, right? Deck doesn't have a lot of flying, and you don't have a lot of card draw, and you're in green, so it can be very difficult for green with its fight-based removal and artifact enchantment removal to defend against a go-wide strategy. You are a go-wide strategy, but I think the obvious hole is flyers. And so this doesn't specifically call out flyers, which makes it better. You know, it's more flexible. But it will often defend you against like a bunch of random bird tokens or whatever without being too niche. You know, if your opponent crashes in with a big board of their tokens, and let's say they're like 2/2s or 3/3s or something, your board of 1/1s or 2/2s does get a meaningful advantage from this, even if you're not actually killing the things that are attacking you. So I think that as long as you have a lot of small creatures and you're vulnerable to an attack from a lot of small creatures at the same time, which this deck is, this could be a good card. So let's, not amazing, but I'll punch it in. Sandstorm. And let's make a new category. I think, did I already make it before this? I don't remember. Called Zandy Removal. Yes, I did already make that category. Okay. I thought I did that while I was prepping this stream. There we are. Put that in that category, and there it is. And I'll probably put some of the weaker ones in the maybe board, and so we'll do that in a minute. But anyway, okay, Sandstorm. On the other hand, we have something that I think is probably unambiguously really good, Steel Hellkite. This is a little bit of a like a knowledge check card. So the important ability is the second one. It says you pay X, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by this creature this turn. So if this deals combat damage to a player, you can pay X and destroy their non-land permanents that have mana value X. The thing to know is that you can pay 0 and wipe the board for tokens. Tokens have mana value 0 and you don't have to pay anything. If this attacks a player and hits, you can only use that once per turn, but you can just pay nothing and wipe all of their tokens. This has the danger to be a bit of a hoser. Again, someone is playing a treasure strategy or whatever. This can be kind of brutal. Now, hopefully, if their treasure deck is fairly robust, they have a mana sink, they can just pop all the treasure and use it. But it can still be rough against the right strategy, your token-wielding opponents, perhaps. But I do think this is really good. It's an artifact. It has to connect for damage to do the board wiping, and even then, it's only if they were very heavy into something like token creatures that it's like that bad. So I feel like this is strong, but it is between being a game-destroying and strong piece of removal. I feel like this is likely okay for this format, and it being a flyer is also good as long as that doesn't like bother you. It's okay if you don't want flyers in your mono green deck. Some people might not prefer that. I'm gonna put this in the maybe board, Sandstorm. But yeah, I think that's pretty good. Terras Dawn. This is another example of the kind of removal I mean. It's a very strong card, but in an environment full of creatures where the game is being won on the board, it's 8 mana for a 9/9 with no abilities, and it gives the opponents that lose permanents 3/3s. As well, it cannot target creatures. So that's good. I feel like that is going to limit its power. The interesting thing about Terras Dawn is that at lower power levels, like it's better in that it's multi-target removal at a low power level, but it's also worse in that the creatures are actually relevant. Whereas at higher power levels, it's not as good because it's a ton of mana and it's an irrelevant body. But it is then better again because the bodies it gives the opponents, the 3/3s, are usually less relevant. I actually really like this card. I think it's a very well-balanced card. It's also important for green's removal suite because it says non-creature, but then permanents. You can destroy lands and you can destroy like planeswalkers, for example, which green can sometimes have a big problem with. So I think Terras Dawn is a good fit for this particular deck. Let's put that in, and I think that's a pretty good choice. On the other hand, we have something like Azuri's Predation. This card is the nuts at this power level. You get a 4/4 for every creature all of your opponents control, and then they all fight. So you'll lose some of them. If your opponent has creatures bigger than a 4/4, those tokens will die. Most of them will live, and the important thing is that there will be a step in between the tokens existing and some of them dying to their own fighting, where you can activate Ovia Pashiri and make like a 20/20 for 5 mana, which, yes, it doesn't have trample. I just feel like at this power level, this is probably a triple one-sided board wipe, a ton of tokens, and you get a creature so large it can one-shot one of your opponents. That is too strong for this power level. In my opinion, that's too strong. If you play this, I think that's fine. You know your playgroup better than me. I'm not trying to call out you, vampbug. That is why I'm not going to include it. If I would not be surprised if this is in your list. It's obviously one of the best cards for this strategy, but I think that's somewhat insane. That's absurd in this deck. Pest Infestation. This is probably okay. It's a little bit similar. You know, it's a multi-target removal and you get tokens. So it's double X and a green. You destroy half that many artifacts and enchantments, and you get that many pests that when they die you gain a life. So if you pay 5, you destroy two artifacts or enchantments, and you get 4 1/1 pests that when they die you gain a life. Pretty good. Not amazing, but pretty good. This card is usually good if the deck wants both resources, and this deck does. I think life gain probably doesn't matter a huge amount, but I still think this is a very good fit for this deck. So yes, Pest Infest, put it in there. I think that's likely a pretty good choice. Collective Resistance, pretty easy slam dunk. This can destroy an artifact and an enchantment and protect a key piece, like your commander, for only 4 mana to do everything, and you can do it modular as well. Quite straightforward. I feel like that's a great utility piece. Great example of a piece of kind of spot removal that I feel like is a good fit for this deck. Just as an aside, we haven't really talked about price. Most of these cards are not expensive because they're not good in most decks. Collective Resistance is an uncommon that is between $1 and $3. I'm not going to talk about price in this video. I'm going to assume that you have the cards or will proxy more expensive cards. I will just note, I'm not going to not talk about it. I will just note, and then that's it, when a card is especially expensive. There's a particular land I have in mind. Anyway, we'll get to it later. Wear Down. These are okay for this deck, in my opinion. There's a couple of these. Gleeful Sabotage was the one I got excited by, but this is a newer one. It's 2 mana to basically destroy 2 artifacts or enchantments for a small inconvenience. This makes you give an opponent a card. You can pick who. It doesn't have to be someone who had an artifact or enchantment destroyed. And then Gleeful Sabotage is basically the same, but you have to tap 2 untapped creatures you control. I think in both cases, these are both pretty good, but it's also it's not unbelievably strong to destroy 2 artifacts or enchantments for 2 mana, like at this power level, again, where the game is probably going to be 1 on the board. You might destroy enough artifacts or enchantments with green's like pretty good access to those effects that you will stop having good targets, basically, is the concern. So I feel like these are good. And it's not that the power level of the card is a problem, but I think they're still only okay, even though overall they're very strong cards. I would argue at kind of higher power levels, these might be a little better. Rootcast Apprenticeship. I'm not really into this. It's not really removal, so it doesn't really solve a problem the deck has. But it is obviously doing a lot of things that are relevant to the strategy. You can make something a little bigger. You can make tokens to fill. You can make copies of the big tokens from Ovia Pishiri. Although, how's that worded? Hold on. Create an XX construct. X is the number of creatures you control. Okay, so it locks in its size when you make it, so you'll copy the size that it was, not the new size. Not any new size. That's not really a problem. That's fine. Just wanted to know how that would work. And then yes, there is this mode where you can have someone sacrifice non-token artifacts. I do think this is better than it seems like it is in Commander. You know, you have an opponent that has a lot of artifacts. This would be weaker because they can pick whatever isn't a big deal to sacrifice, but you can do it 3 times to the same player, and you can simply use it to single out players who don't have that many artifacts. Again, the concern with this kind of thing is that it often won't let you destroy something you really need destroyed from a dedicated artifact player. Well, when it's good, it usually hoses a player and makes them simply not have their only mana rock or something like that. You know, you destroyed just their soul ring and they had nothing else. And then like, yes, that was good, but that player probably just loses now. And it didn't really destroy like an artifact that was going to make you lose. So I don't know. You might put this card in, but I feel like I don't really count it as removal. That's just a nice utility. Certainly a relevant card for this strategy though. Just wanted to bring this up in the same thread as the Primeval Light, like that enchantment wipe that I talked about before. Exile up to 3 target enchantments. A very strong enchantment removal. It's a little cheaper. 3 is often enough. It exiles them, so if they're indestructible, like the Theros gods that are indestructible enchantment creatures, this will still kill them. And it has cycling, and I don't think Primeval Light was an instant. This is an instant. In many ways, this is just even better. This is very strong at what it does, and I feel like the deck can often afford to pay the cycling. The problem is this mostly just hoses a player that chooses to play enchantments. So for a lower power play group that doesn't have decks that are built to rebuild from that, you have to decide if that is appropriate. Now, again, I'm assuming a lot about your play group being one, I'm trying not to assume. If your play group can withstand that, I think this is a good card, but I won't include it on my own. Spinning Wheel. I don't think this is a good choice. I think this is mostly better with Death Touch, and if your creature is just kind of big, I feel like this is usually a really inefficient way to do removal. Again, I think it's always helpful with cards like this to make an example. So you pay 6 mana into this. X is 2, and you pay 2, 2, and then 2. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each of 2 target creatures or planeswalkers. Hits planeswalkers, we like that. But for 6 mana, you need to have a big creature in play, and it just kills 2 creatures. And they also have to be killable, not have Death Touch, not be too large. They can have Death Touch, actually. You don't take damage back. That's good. But I don't think this is that efficient in this deck in practice. You're not even guaranteed the kills, so when you're even a little behind, this is quite bad for this deck. Likewise, I think Where was that one card? Betrayal at the Vault. It's pretty much the same thing. It's instant, which is certainly an upgrade, and 6 is probably the most likely cost you would have set Spinning Wheel Kick to, so this is mostly better, but I think it's still bad in this case. If you have the creature, you will probably kill 2 medium-sized creatures from your opponents. I just don't think that's that good for 6 mana, but it's certainly not the worst thing in the world, so whatever. I don't know what this is. Let's talk about Palu for a sec. It's a body, so that's good. Remember, we like it to be on a creature because Ovia will make bigger tokens. And then it has XX and green monstrosity. It gets bigger, and then it does like a fireball that you can divide up to your opponent's creatures. They do get to damage it back. This is good at killing tokens, like multiple tokens, or like utility creatures. I feel like that kind of removal might be kind of nice for this deck, and it does come with a body. It's a little mana intensive though, so I don't know. Let's say Palu goes in the maybe category. Also, a card I am a big fan of, if you can't tell, the Palu in all his adorable renditions. Kusarigama, yeah. This is good in this deck. It's expensive to equip. Use 6 to play it and equip it. It gives the creature bad fire breathing. You can pay 2 mana to give it 1/1. +1/+0. When it deals combat damage to a blocking creature, it does that much damage to each other creature the defending player controls. Very, very strong. It's like a reverse overrun. You don't go through to your opponent, you go through to their other creatures, like an inverse overrun. It might be a little on the strong side, in that it's very rare that this deck attacking with this equipped to something will not either connect for damage or basically wipe the opponent's unprotected creatures. But it's very expensive to set up, and it's an artifact, which is pretty easy to destroy. So I think good. It's also kind of not, I don't know, like I just like having a variety of mechanics in decks as well. So I kind of like to err on the side of, oh, it's something different for this strategy that could be fun. Okay, what the hell does this do? I've never seen this before. Monster sound select deals X damage, divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. X is the greatest power among creatures you control as you do this. Wait, what? Okay, it's 5. You have like a 7/7, and it deals 7 damage, divided among any number of targets. What? What is this? Like green buckshot? This is a red card. This is a red spell. I don't know. This is better than so think back to Spinning Wheel Kick and Betrayal at the Vault. This seems better to me. I don't know. I think this is good. I'm gonna say maybe in the I don't know if it's that good. I feel like it's kind of a fireball. I'm gonna put it in the big category. I don't know. I didn't know that card existed. That's very strange. Let's go to the second list. So this one is cards that are like a disenchant. So they destroy an artifact or enchantment. This is going to go quicker because a lot of these are more straightforward. They don't solve the deck's broader problem of needing to win on the board. This deck already has like okay options for artifact and enchantment removal, so we need to find something good for it to be worth it. Right away, we can start talking about Boseiju. Now this card is $32, so what I said about price before. This is a very good deck for this card. I feel like exactly what this deck wants is to play a higher land count, but still have the removal when it needs it, and it isn't that fussed about giving the opponent the land. And this even hits non-basic lands, which is a very nice utility. So yeah, this is a little better than it is normally pretty ubiquitous. I kind of hate this card, of course. Like this should sort of be in every green deck, but it's $32. So I don't know, proxy. Just to say, I think that is a good choice for this deck, because a lot of the ones that are like it's a body and then you just throw an artifact or enchantment, I'm just not that into. I'm definitely more into this type, where you keep the body, but for a slight premium on the mana cost up front, rather than something like, let's say, Haywire Might, which is cheaper overall, and you get to, it's like a payment plan card. You don't have to pay it all at once, but you lose the body when you activate the removal. I just feel like that doesn't fit this deck that well. It's not really bad, but it's kind of a non-bow for this strategy. It doesn't really matter that it's a creature a lot of the time. That being said, neither card is bad. I mean, these are perfectly fine types of cards in general. I would err on the side of something like Reclamation Sage if you want more of these effects, and not Acidic Slime, which is even more expensive for the utility of letting you hit lands, and then it has Death Touch. I don't think it's worth the 5 mana for that. So let's keep going. Yeah, there's a lot of variants of this type of card that are like a weird green creature that's always flavored as fungus that can sacrifice itself to destroy an artifact or enchantment or do a third thing, in this case proliferate. And I noticed that you have one already. Where is it? There it is, Insidious Fungus. That this one, the extra thing it can do is draw a card, then you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, which is a great fit for this deck. Like, play this one, but I don't think playing any of the others makes that much sense. Let's see. Ooh, Kogla. Okay, so this is sort of a complicated card, but isn't Ovia Pashiri a human? Yeah, okay. It's a 7/6 for 6. When it comes into the battlefield, it fights something, so creature removal. When it attacks, so you have to untap with it, it destroys an artifact or enchantment the defender controls. Doesn't have to connect, the attack doesn't have to finish. Just when you declare it as an attacker, it kills the thing. Great, so multi-removal on a body for about the price the deck wants to play, and it not only protects itself if you return a human you control to its owner's hand, the returning the human to its owner's hand can dodge removal. You use this to protect Ovia instead, when Kogla doesn't even need the destruction. This is the perfect deck for this card. This deck and few others want to play this card. Exactly. That's fantastic. This is $5 or $2 to $5, but I bet you have or can get a copy of that reasonably if you want to play it in paper. So yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, there's all these green creatures. Let's pull up Silverback Elder. Mass Vandal is probably worth talking about. A lot of these are similar to the ones we looked at before. Cause the Caterpillar. I don't remember what this Nissa does, so let's look at it. Steelbane Hydra, yeah, probably yes. Again, Foundation Breaker is one of those, like, it's a creature and you destroy an artifact or enchantment, but I feel like the upcharge is a little high, so I don't hate that, but I just don't think it's that good. World Breaker, the upcharge is way too high. Titan of Industry. Tranquil Frillback exiles players' whole graveyards and can actually only destroy an artifact or enchantment once. This is one of those variants where you can't pick a mode more than one time. So this is a very good card, but I don't think it has the hardcore graveyard hosing, plus it actually only destroys one target. So it doesn't really do the things the deck is looking for in this section. So I'm going to say no, but it's a good card. I don't know. That's fine. Just as an aside of the like Reclamation Sage likes, this might be one of the best ones. It's a 4/4 for 3, it has reach, and you get the artifact and enchantment destruction. The body is much better that you get with the artifact or enchantment destruction for no upcharge in mana cost. Reclamation Sage is 3 mana as well, but you have to gift a card. I think this is good if you need this effect. Go figure. Silverback, yeah, again, there's lots of these that are like when you cast a creature, you get a utility thing. This gives you land ramp. This gives you artifact or enchantment. This gives you life. I feel like this is a pretty straightforward choice for this deck. And the power is limited by the fact that you need to play creatures. So it won't trigger off lots of stuff, though this deck is erring on the side of playing a lot of creatures. It also helps with the card draw things. So I think a pretty great choice. Mass Vandal. Again, this is one of those variants where at its best, it can be an artifact enchantment removal and you get a body for only 2 mana. But the problem is that you need a creature card in a graveyard to target in your graveyard. And this deck frequently will not have that on curve. So I think this is kind of a fail for this particular strategy. You will usually whiff this if you play it on curve. So but it's a good card in general. I just honestly don't remember what this does. You make an XX where it's its loyalty. Okay, so she makes a token every turn if you want. Artifact and enchantment removal dispenser. And then she has an overrun effect. So in the spirit of the deck, I'll avoid this. But if you don't mind, maybe it's fine. The concern is that if you pay the full 7 for her, you can do it right away. So this basically just is an overrun. So out of conscience for how the deck has been pitched, I won't include that, but it's probably good. Steelbane. I like this. I think this is a perfect type of multi-removal in this type of power level. You get to make it as big as you need. you can remove the tokens to shoot artifacts and enchantments on a payment plan like schedule, and you can keep a token on it so that you retain a body for Ovia. And if there were any ways to put tokens back on it, then counters back on it, you could refill it. So I think that's a great choice. And a card I'm a pretty big fan of in general. I'm displeased to see it's gone up in price, but what can you do? This is probably even better than Silverback Elder for this deck. It's just less greedy. It's more expensive, but when you play it, you get 2 of the effects. Again, you cannot pick Destroy Target Artifact or Enchantment twice, but it does give you multiple bodies or shield counters or life and the artifact and enchantment destruction. I actually don't think this is that amazing for this deck, but I do feel like it's good. So let's include it. And what else we got? Is there more? Yeah, let's see. Wow, quite a few actually. Okay, I mean, as you would expect, green has lots of these effects, I guess. So let's just see what else there is. Cheap artifact or enchantment destruction, again, probably not worth that. Let's look at Thief of Existence really quick. And then that's probably most. I like Null Mage Advocate, so we're going to talk about that actually. Artifact, enchantment, and land for 6 mana I don't think is good. Rending Vines I actually do want to talk about. And that's probably going to be it. Let's see. Or we just won't have time. Yeah. Okay, yeah, let's talk about those. But again, some of these, it's like you can get a 2-for-1 for 3 instead of 2, but you don't need to meet the condition. So if you like my cards that are like 2 mana and you do 2 artifacts or enchantments, but you need to meet some basic condition, maybe you want this as well. One thing about this is you do need to destroy specifically 1 artifact and 1 enchantment, whereas the other ones can be flexible, 2 of each or 1 of each, 2 of the same type or 1 of each. So it's a little worse, but again, in Commander, a lot of the time that's fine. So yeah, we should probably just put Stomp and Howl in if we're going to put the other ones in. Because a lot of the time not needing to meet the condition is worth 1 more mana. Okay, quick discussion of these remaining ones. Thief of Existence. Yeah, the main thing is just that it's non-land permanent targeting again for mana value 4 or less, which is a little restrictive, but it still hits a lot of stuff. It does mean target opponent has to draw a card after it leaves, but again, this is kind of like that Scrap Raccoon card from before. If you're going to pay 3 mana for basically a Reclamation Sage, I think this is usually a pretty significant upgrade, so decide for yourself. I don't think those effects are that good in this deck, but if you do, then maybe consider that one. Null Mage, this is fantastic, but it's a little group huggy, so that is down to taste. I'll leave it out, but I think this is very good. A lot of the time you will be able to find an opponent who either has bad targets, like you can return things they likely won't get much use out of, or they don't have any targets. You target the same opponent to return cards over and over, and then they just don't have any. Because the returning the cards is on resolution rather than as a cost, I would think that means... No, you do need targets. That's incorrect. Okay. Yeah, but anyway, a lot of the time I think this is okay. You have repeated artifact and enchantment removal and a body, and you keep the body, again for 3 mana, but as a cost, you have to give an opponent some cards back. I like this, but it's down to... It's a little group huggy, so I'll avoid it. The reason I put Rending Vines in is that I think this type of card is probably really good in this deck. So again, it's just 1 artifact or enchantment removal, but it replaces the card. And the condition is usually easy to meet for this deck. You should have a full hand. So I like Rending Vines as a pick for this deck. That type of spot removal where you don't really lose any resources, but it's just not that powerful in exchange is, I think, a fine fit here. As we've talked, I've become enamored of Wear Down and Gleeful Sabotage. Also, especially Gleeful Sabotage, like we meet the conditions for this very easily. Conspire does require that the creatures you tap to make the copy, you have to tap 2 creatures to make the copy, share a color with the spell, and Ovia makes colorless tokens, but I think literally everything else in the entire deck, almost everything else in the entire deck, is a colored creature. There's very few artifacts in here currently, so that's probably fine. If you don't like Wear Down because you don't want to gift anyone anything as a matter of principle, maybe Stomp and Howl. And I find myself really liking the idea of Sandstorm, so I'm going to put that in, but I know everybody probably hates that and doesn't want to put something like Sandstorm in, but I think this could be really fun, and it's very nice to have a variety like that. You know, one more thing it reminds me of actually that might be more to your taste would be Arashi. Yes. So this is more of a flying hoser. You get the body, you can play it and then use it to fireball flying creatures, or you can play it as a board wipe, like a spell for flying creatures. Yeah, that's probably usually better. Let's put that in instead. That's a more robust edition, I think. I want to play Sandstorm, but I'm just being a nerd, and it's not actually that good. That's my list. So Arashi, Collective Resistance, Gleeful Sabotage, Kogla, Kusarigama, Monstrous Onslaught, although I actually don't know, but I feel like this is really good. I think this is really good. Can it be any number of players? Just any number of target creatures. No, yeah, this is ridiculous. You can like destroy all 3 players, all of their utility creatures with one. Yeah, no, this is good. We should put this in. Pest Infestation, Silverback Elder. Again, a little bit more of a draw or value thing though, but it's still very good. This card is so good. Steel Hellkite, Steelbane Hydra, Stomp and Howl, and Terastodon. With the note that there's some good stuff in here. I don't know. Okay, now we get to the end part where we get to see what you picked. I'm excited for this part. We basically did the parlay. You basically just for me gave me a little fun extra round where I get to see what you chose. So let's take a look. I'm going to unspoiler the 12 cards, and then I will tell you the ones that are overlap with what I picked, and then talk through the new ones that I didn't pick. Okay, I'm reading through them. So Pest Infestation, you chose. Monstrous Onslaught, yep, you picked. Okay, I didn't know about that card. Kogla was in your list as well. Yep, this card is amazing for this deck. Titan of Industry was in your list. Azuri's Predation, which was that 8-mana card that summons a bunch of 4/4s to fight everything. That was one of yours. And then I think everything else is new. Though we did talk about Haywire Might. That's that artifact that only 2 mana, you destroy an artifact or enchantment, you gain a life, and it can be a body, but not at the same time. I wasn't that high on them, but it's not a bad card. And then the other ones are cards we have not talked about, so I will look those up. So Kenrith's Transformation, a lot of them are like good spot removal that I avoided. And so I'll talk about each of them in turn. I hope I'm not going too hard on the like power level of deck thing. I just feel like that's an interesting topic that doesn't get talked about that much and might be worthwhile. Oh, that's a good choice. Okay, so some of these I can see. I don't know what one of these cards is. What is Stormkeld Vanguard? Oh, sure. Yeah, okay, I can get behind this. All right, so let's look at very quickly, we can look at the cards you included that I didn't even cover. Stormkeld is an adventure card. So you get a basic artifact or enchantment destruction spell, and then a 6/7 for 6 that can't be blocked by smaller creatures. It's fine, you know, again, sort of payment plan-esque. I would consider playing one of the really beefy 3 mana, you know, like 4/4 with Reach or that 4/4 Thief of Existence, if you're going to consider this. But I think it is different. You know, you get a bomb instead. I just feel like this deck's whole thing is you can vending machine a 6/6 for about 5 or 6 mana already whenever you want. So having the extra card that this gives you be a 6/6 for 6 ish, it is a little better than a 6/6 for 6, is just not that good in my opinion, but I get why you'd play this too. Certainly not a nonsensical inclusion. Kenrith's, on the other hand, a ridiculously powerful card. You cast this on your opponent's commander, and they'll probably just have to kill it and then replay it most of the time. So it's kind of better than removing it, because they usually need to either waste their own removal and then replay it, or, you know, waste their removal destroying the artifact or enchantment. Very good. My concern with this card was actually that the power level might be a touch high. I think there's basically no green deck that doesn't want to include this if you want to include the staples, unless you want to go out of your way to avoid them, and the power level is such that it's okay. But for a table unprepared for this can very quickly make an opponent just unable to do their deck's thing. So while I don't play at that power level or enjoy that type of Magic, I enjoy having it be that you do everything in your power to screw your opponents with budget restrictions, and then they fight back. At the wrong power level, this can be pretty mean. I will trust you that it's a good fit. It seems fine. Again, it seems like you all run a good amount of protection and removal. Beast Within, yep, of course. Destroy a permanent. Again, I think the main important thing here is that you can hit card types that green is kind of bad at, like lands and especially planeswalkers. I don't know how much that's a thing in your playgroup. This might be kind of bad in this deck if your playgroup doesn't have like any planeswalkers, because I feel like you have basically every other card type handled, and then it's just like a slightly more mana expensive version that gives them a 3/3. This might be surprisingly bad at a low power level. But at a medium or higher one, yes, this is extremely good. It's ubiquitous for a reason. Null Elemental Blast. What an inspired choice. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because your deck has a very high number of utility lands, you have the source of colorless to pay for it easily. You've got a great balance of enough colored mana, but plenty of colorless utility lands as you need to cash in on that as a monocolor deck to gain that advantage back. So you get to run stuff like this. I noticed you already had Spectrum Sentinel as well. Great. Yeah, I totally get this. And certainly as a piece of spot removal, this is pretty slick. Like this is very good in Commander. For 1 mana, you kind of counter or destroy anything kind of is very, very strong. And then Scavenging Ooze. Yeah, there's not that much like single target graveyard hate. And the problem, as I'm sure you've noticed, is that a lot of the time when it exists, it's like the card only does that. Like this isn't a particularly good card for this deck. I don't think you really want like a slowly growing medium value beater. Like I don't think this deck really wants any of that. It just wants the repeated graveyard exile. And the problem is that a lot of the time cards that do just that and don't bomb the whole graveyard only do that one thing, and then it's not much utility. So I get this. I think it's mature of you to include this, but I hate needing to put this in. I want there to be more flexible cards that don't destroy the whole graveyard, that just destroy 1 or 2 cards. But alas, this is why we can't have nice things. Too bad. Pretty interesting. I was surprised to see that we agreed on so many specific pieces of removal. Like that's interesting, but a lot of them are fairly obviously good in here. Like Pest Infestation, I think, is a pretty obvious one. And then stuff like Azuri's Predation, like it's not exactly rocket science. That's going to be really good. I don't have that many like pet cards that are not in here. You might have been able to tell, but I was going to bring up Kusarigama, but it just was in there. It was tagged as a one-sided board wipe, I guess. And Steel Hellkite is an old classic for a monocolor, like red or green, that can have problems with stuff like tokens. That's classic. And I played Standard when Steel Hellkite was a card, so I remember it very fondly. Yes, some of these I'm not super thrilled with. I do think that because you have some cards in here that are basically single artifact or enchantment spot removal, I am pretty confident that Collective Resistance is better most of the time than those cards, and it can also destroy both targets as well. I really like the Destroy 2 artifact and enchantment cards. I think those are very strong. A lot of the time, only 2 or 3 mana for a 2-for-1 in a deck with a lot of mana and an okay amount of resources is just, that adds up. You know, spot removal can be bad, but when you can just pick and choose lots of good value permanents constantly like that, I think that adds up. I have a deck that has removal like that, and I find it really adds up. You can play a really interesting black, red, green, which somehow I'm forgetting, Jund, thank you, the shard name, deck that just has a bunch of like scattershot removal that destroys like 4 different kinds of permanents for 1 card, and usually not very cheap, you know, like 4 mana or something, but boy does that add up. Like you end up being able to you can't destroy everything, but you have so many shots, you end up being able to destroy enough that most engines will simply not work. Very good feeling type of strategy, especially if, again, the opponent plans for the interaction and they have to build back up through the machine gun, but you're not actually wiping the board. They still get to keep some things. Very cool. You can still play Magic, but everybody plays in a pit fight, a sweaty, gross pit fight full of Wrecking Ball or whatever that one card is called. Anyway, what a delightful parlay. And by the way, I encourage this. You're not abusing parlay by doing this. You did the good thing, which has made it so I have enough resources set up by you, and they're easier for you to put out, right? Like you just show me a few of your Scryfall searches and your deck list, and then I can spend the time on the thing you were interested in. And you even gave me a little extra. I don't know what value it gives you to show me the cards you picked, but I'm very happy you did that. I thought that was interesting. So thank you. I really enjoyed this parlay. That was nice. And I would love to do more of these. You're not pushing the envelope or cheating or anything. I want to do the mental jumping jacks. That is why I made this my part of my career. So if you'd like to get one of these yourself, you can do so in the description. And provided that you prepare reasonably, like you want me to do a tier list, send me a link to the tier maker thing you want me to do, something like that. If people do that, you're perfectly welcome to do that. I would love it. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to the next one.